joining me for this really fun project. I love this cardigan. It's a really easy one to make since it's worked flat, so I hope you enjoy this too. You can make it cropped or you can make it longer. You can do these type of puff sleeves. You can do different sleeves. We have so many options in this pattern. It's so much fun. So let's go ahead and dive right in. For this cardigan, we have some options for the yarn. I went with both of these. I made my short one in the comfy worsted weight in the silver sage colorway. This is 109 yards per skein. And then also I made my long one in the comfy color mist worsted weight. This is foggy beach, but this is 219 yards per hank. Now, if you buy it in a hank, be sure to possibly get a yarn swift and winder so that it's easier to use. The skeins are ready to go right from purchasing. So many colors for here, and there's some beautiful colors here. You can see like the difference in style that comes out of these, and whichever one you go to, it will be gorgeous. They are the same weight, they gauge the same. You will also need a size I 5.5 hook as well as a size G 4mm. This will be for the ribbing option only. If you're not doing ribbing, not as critical. And then you'll need a yarn needle, some stitch markers, a pair of scissors, and then of course, if you would like some blocking pins and mats. That will make it much easier. This fabric does lean a little bit, so if you want to block it for a really sharp look, that's a good idea to have on hand as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Now for this pattern, I'm going to start by just making a swatch and showing you how to do the established row pattern repeat. And so you can follow along. I've chained 20 stitches, and this is also a great opportunity to make a swatch to check your gauge before getting started on your project, so you know if you need to go up or down hook size, change our tension, and so that the sizing will be correct. So after chaining 20, our very first row, I'm starting in the very first chain from the hook, and I'm working in those back humps. I can start from the first chain without doing an extra turning chain, because a lot of times the turning chains I found just aren't necessary and add extra bulk. So I am starting in that very first chain from the hook with a single crochet in the back hump only. And then I'm going to go ahead and mark that, because whenever I'm testing out a stitch pattern or anything with a garment, really, I love using stitch markers. It just saves trouble later, and it's more likely you won't mess up on anything. Now I'm going to single crochet the remaining stitches across for this row in those back humps. And that is row 1. We're simply doing a row of single crochet across the chains. So whatever size you're working, this is how row 1 is worked. And now we're going to turn for row 2, and we will be single crocheting right into that first stitch. If you prefer to add chain ones, you can, but like I said, it's not necessary. And then grab another stitch marker, and it's once again a great idea to mark the first stitch of each row, especially when trying out a new stitch pattern repeat. Then we're going to single crochet into the next stitch, chain 1, skip 1, single crochet. And that's our repeat for the rest of these stitches. That is chain 1, skip 1, single crochet in the next. So simply repeat that across for row 2. So now that I'm at the end of row 2, I can simply move that stitch marker and single crochet into that last stitch and then turn. Now row 2 and 3 are basically row 3 and 4 are basically a repeat of row 2. We're just going to be working those single crochet stitches into the chain spaces. So we'll start by doing a single crochet into the first stitch, and then go ahead and mark that stitch. And then we're going to do a single crochet into the next, which is a chain space. Then we're going to chain 1, skip 1, which is a single crochet stitch, and then single crochet into the next chain space. So we will be repeating that across here. So it's chain 1, skip 1, single crochet. We're going to do that all the way across. Chain 1, skip 1, single crochet. And as we get to the end here, it works out that we're still doing this in pattern, and we're single crocheting into this last stitch. Now the next row is an exact repeat of what we just did. So we will single crochet in the first, single crochet in that chain space, and then we'll be doing our repeat across the rest of the row, which will be a chain 1, skip 1, single crochet in the chain space. So this is how we work row 4 of this established row pattern. Now that I'm at the end of row 4, we're going to turn and work row 5. And row 5 is the last row of this established pattern repeat. So this row repeat is actually rows 2 through 5. Row 1 was just our base row. So row 2, 3, and 4 that we just did. And now row 5, those 4 rows are what will repeat over and over again. So for row 5, I like to start with a stacked single crochet. In order to do this, we won't be chaining anything. We're going to insert our hook right into that first stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, and yarn over and pull through both loops on the hook. Yes, we just did a single crochet stitch, but now we're going to stack it. So we're going to insert our hook back into this left bar of the stitch we just made, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through both loops on the hook. And I do find it crucial to mark your stacked single crochets because you don't want to work around the edge and add an extra stitch on. Want to make sure that you're marking the top of that stacked single crochet. And now we have our very first stitch in this row. Then in this next chain space, we are going to double crochet 2 stitches. We're going to skip the next, and in the next chain space, double crochet 2 stitches. We're going to continue to repeat that across until we get to the last stitch. So we're simply skipping a stitch and doing 2 double crochet stitches into that chain space across. And as I get to the end of row 5, I'm doing 2 double crochet stitches into that chain space, skipping the next, and then in the very last, we will simply do 1 double crochet stitch. And now we're set up to keep repeating rows 2 through 5, which is the established row pattern. Now for the pattern that I will be showing on camera today, I'm going to be doing the size small. It is the cropped version that I'll be doing on camera, and I'll be talking about the modifications to have it be a bit longer or shorter, whatever you want to make it. And so I will start by chaining 68 stitches for the size small, and we'll be working that back panel, and the rows that we'll do will determine the length of the cardigan. So you'll chain the amount of stitches that's listed in the pattern for your size, and then do this established pattern repeat for as many times as you would like to have the length that goes from the arms, underneath the arms, down. So you could do it a crop version or a longer version. So I'm going to work that back panel and show you what that looks like. So once you've got this bottom portion done, now it's time to add the sleeves, which I know this doesn't look like we've got much here. I'm making the crop version, so just remember that this one's not going to be a long version. But even still, I question myself going, oh, is this enough? But remember, this is only going to your underarm, and then we'll also have a little bit of ribbing on the bottom. So this isn't going to go all the way up your back. We're not quite there yet. So you've got to think of if you were to hold this up just under your arm and see if you like that length. If you want to add more rows, just remember you'll also add it on the other side. And I would add them in the repeat of the 4 rows. So if you're going to add more, add it in 4-row increments. Now for the cropped cardigan, we will have a total of 24 rows done in the established pattern row repeat. And for the longer cardigan, it will be a total of 60 rows. So now we're ready to do the sleeves. And I've got my yarn on this side. I just finished this row. But before we continue doing the sleeves and working the stitches over here, we want to set up this side for when we're ready to work stitches across. Because what we'll be doing is we'll be extending on each side of this rectangle, extending out, and we'll be working the sleeves until it gets to the portion where we'll need to add a spot for the neck. So this is still working up the back portion of this. So what we'll do is we'll leave this side here, and we're going to go ahead and attach the yarn. You can turn your work. You can attach the yarn to the other side. Grab another ball of yarn because we're going to only use it for just a second. And now we're going to chain 68. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And remember, you do not want to chain these tightly. You want these to be looser chains. Now, once you chain the 68 stitches, I want you to double check the arm length that you're doing because you can always do less of these chains on each side to do, say, like a quarter length sleeve. I'm doing this for approximately 17 inches. I like to have a little bit of extra, even though I'm still putting a cuff on there. I like to have a little bit extra to add to that poof sleeve at the bottom. So if you want to add more chains, this is where you would do so in increments of 2. So I've done 68 chains, and I'm going to go ahead and fasten off this side, and then we're going to go back to our other side and go ahead and pull that through. We have got those 68 chains that we can work through. I'm going to turn back to the side I was at. So I've got my right side facing me. And on this side, I'm going to go ahead and also chain 68 stitches. Now I'm not chaining any turning chains for this because the way we start our rows, we don't need any turning chains. So now that I have those 68 chains, I'm going to go ahead and turn the whole thing. And this is where we'll be able to see the direction that we're heading here. You can go ahead and weave in this end over here if you want. We don't want it to fall out, so don't pull too hard. And now we've got a really long looking weird thing here. So we have our original rectangle that we worked on. Move this yarn over here. And then we have a sleeve, like all these chains that will be a sleeve on one side, and then all these chains that will be a sleeve on the other side. So now we have a wrong side facing, and we're going to continue to go in our stitch pattern. So since we don't need any turning chains because we're going to work right into that very first stitch, we're simply going to single crochet into the first chain from the hook. And then we will single crochet into the next stitch. And then this is where we do our chain 1, skip a chain, single crochet into the next. So chain 1, skip 1, single crochet. And we are going to work that all the way across these chains, all the way across this body portion, and all the way across our other set of chains. So I'm going to work that, and then I'll come right back. So now that I've got to the end of working across the chains and the body, we're going to go ahead and turn all of this. And I know it feels a bit stringy right now, but it will come together nicely. So now I'm going to be working across these chains and this back body, continuing in our stitch pattern repeat, the 4-row repeat, until we get to the part where we'll need to stop and work the neck opening. So we'll need to make space for that neck. So we'll be working across both arms here and the back, and we'll be doing that until we're ready to place the part for the neck. So now that I've worked this section, so we've got this really odd looking long panel thing happening, it is time for us to simply work on the right panel. So we're not going to be working all the way across now. I have my 21 rows for this size, and now I'm working on the next row. And for this row, starting the right panel, I am only going to work some of the stitches that ends up being halfway of this garment. Now for this size, for the size small, I will simply work for 102 stitches, and then I'm going to turn, leaving the rest of this unworked. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my work and continue to work in the stitch pattern. Now your stitch pattern row might be different than the row I'm on, depending on what size you are on. You simply work the amount of stitches required that the written pattern says for that many stitches, and then we're going to be working in rows again. And for this size, I will be working 21 more rows on the right panel, which will also make this kind of go into a different style of shape. But I'm going to work 21 more rows, and then we'll come back and we're going to go ahead and make sure that we have the sleeve finished and only work on the body. So go ahead and work this for 21 more rows. For the size small, it will be a different row count for different sizes. So now that we've finished this area of the sleeve, and over here's where our neck will go. So we've made some space for that, but we're ready to be done with working all this length. we're going to go ahead and turn this, and then we're going to skip the first 68 stitches, which means I've fastened off this end. And as we turn, I will skip the first 68 stitches, then attach the yarn and work the remaining 34 stitches in the stitch pattern. Mm. So working this established row repeat for the 34 stitches, I'm going to be working this panel for as many rows as we did before we started the sleeve on the back. We want those to match up. So for the cropped cardigan, if you're making the cropped cardigan, that would be a total of 24 more rows. And for the longer cardigan, we will repeat that established row pattern for a total of 60 more rows. But if you've customized this and you've changed the row count, which is totally fine, just make sure you're working the same amount of rows here as we did here when we first started with that main back panel, because we want the length from underneath both these sleeves to match. So go ahead and work that in the established row repeat and then come on back. Now for this very last row after doing those repeats, we are going to do one row of single crochet stitches all the way across, and then we are going to fasten off when we are done with this right panel side. So now that we have our right panel done, and this is going to look like a very odd shape in front of you. This is actually the bottom back. This is where both arms come in. We've got the right arm done and the right front panel done. Now it's time to work on this left side. So we're just going to be basically repeating what we did over here, but flipping it the other way. So we're going to go ahead and join our yarn, and we're going to work 102 stitches to the edge. Now, depending on what the last established row repeat was for you, this might look a little bit different. I know when I did the rows where it was the double crochet rows, I actually had to leave one stitch unworked here to make it work out. But we essentially want to count in 102 stitches, and then we want to go ahead and work our established row repeat across those 102 stitches. Now we want to make sure that we have the same row facing us that we were on when we did this other side, so that as we work, our established row repeat is with the right side facing with the rest of it when we work this side. So I'm going to go ahead and attach my yarn, and I'm going to work this section here for this side. So I'm working both across the sleeves and this body part, and I'm going to work that up until I get to as many rows as I need. So it's the same amount of rows for the first arm, and then I will come on back. So now that we have this panel worked up the same amount of rows as this part for the arms, now it's time for us to stop working the arms and only work the front panel just like we did on this side. So what I've done is I've marked the last 68 stitches of this row, and it's time for us to go ahead and work the first 34 stitches and then work that in the same amount of rows as this side. But the nice thing about when we're working this panel is we don't have to fasten off in order to continue working like we had to on this other side. So I can simply turn, work the first 34 stitches in this row, and then stop, leaving the rest of the 68 stitches unworked. So we'll simply start by working in our established stitch repeat pattern. So we want to make sure that we're keeping that beautiful pattern we've been working before. So whatever row that you're on for this, you just keep working that row in pattern for the 34 stitches. Now that I've done those 34 stitches, I will turn and continue to work in that stitch pattern repeat until I'm matching as many rows as I did on this side. For this version, I'm doing a cropped, but it would be longer if it was a longer cardigan. And these stitches, remember, will also, the amount of rows here will match the back part of our cardigan as well. So I'm going to go work up these, and then I'll come on back. So now that I've finished this panel and we've got them matching on the front, I'm going to go ahead and fasten off, leaving a long tail for me to do some seaming later. I'm just going to set that aside and leave that there. We're going to come back and we're going to be working around this front opening. But in order to do this, you'll want to have the right side facing you. So I'm going to flip this over. Now this is the right side facing me. This is the side that will go around our neck on the front, and this is what we will be seeing. And so in order to do this front area, I'm going to go ahead and on this bottom left corner here, right here, we're going to attach the yarn working with the right side facing us, and we're going to slip stitch around this entire opening with our yarn. So let me show you what that looks like. So I'm simply going to attach the yarn to this front corner. I like to chain one and tighten that down a lot. And then I'm going to simply slip stitch one stitch, keeping my slip stitches somewhat loose. You don't want them to be too tight. I'm going to slip stitch one stitch per single crochet row. And then when I get to the double crochet rows, I'll do 2 slip stitches per double crochet row. And I'll be doing this all the way around that front opening. Sometimes I like to go through that double crochet stitch. I find that it ties that slip stitch a bit better. So here is 1 slip stitch per single crochet row, another slip stitch per single crochet row, and then here's our 3rd single crochet row. And this next one's a double crochet row, so I'm going to do 2 slip stitches for that row. So we'll simply repeat that until we've done this entire opening and then come on back. So we have our slip stitches all the way around this front opening, and it's time for us to turn, and we're going to be working a unique stitch combination across the front of this. Now I like to do the slip stitches because it will create a nicer edge versus just working into the raw edge of a crochet garment. The slip stitches really create a clean look, but we will be working into these slip stitches for this next row. And also we're going to be working only into the front loops of these slip stitches. You'll want to have a stitch marker handy when we get started here. So for this stitch combination, we are going to chain 1 at the beginning of this row. This is not counted as a stitch, and one of the few times we're doing this in this pattern. We're going to go ahead and skip the very first slip stitch, and into the front loop only of the 2nd slip stitch, we are going to do a half double crochet. It is a good idea to mark this stitch right here because the way that we're working these stitches, it's easy to lose track of the first stitch in this row. Now the next stitch we're going to work is a puff stitch. However, we're going to be working it back into the stitch that we skipped and into the front loop only of that slip stitch. So to do this, we will yarn over, insert our hook into the front loop only. Sometimes I like to turn and make sure I'm getting that front loop only. Yarn over and pull up a loop. Yarn over again, insert the same stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. There we go. I have 5 loops on the hook. Then we will yarn over and do that one more time. This feels a bit tricky, especially for this very first stitch. And now I have 7 loops on this hook, and I can yarn over and pull through all 7 loops. And that is our 2nd stitch in this row. This will be our repeat. So when we're looking at the next stitches, we're going to skip the next, and we're going to half double crochet into the next stitch. And then we're kind of working over that half double crochet in order to do our puff stitches. So I will yarn over, insert my hook into the front loop only of that slip stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. Do that 2 more times until there are 7 loops on the hook. And then we will yarn over and pull through all 7 loops. We're going to be repeating that all the way across the front of this. So I'm going to show you one more time. We are going to skip the next slip stitch and in the front loop only half double crochet into the next slip stitch. Then we will yarn over, insert our hook into the skipped slip stitch, but only in that front loop only. Yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over, pull up a loop again, and one more time, yarn over and pull up a loop until there are 7 loops on the hook. Then yarn over and pull through all 7 loops. This creates a really nice beaded look design going on here, and when we do our next row, it will look really cool. So complete that all the way across these front stitches. So as you reach the end of this row, doing this stitch repeat, you might find if you do have 1 stitch left over, go ahead and simply do a half double crochet into that stitch and then turn. Just the way that we slip stitch, sometimes I find instead of like counting along this edge, just follow it as best you can. And if you have that last stitch, you can simply do a half double crochet and complete that row. And then we're ready to turn, and we're going to repeat that again. Now, if you did end this row with a half double crochet, we're going to go ahead and start the next row with a half double crochet as well, which I substitute as a standing single crochet. We've been doing those. I like to do that at the start. This way it will keep this pattern in pattern. Now, if you didn't need to do this and you ended with a puff stitch, you can simply chain one and follow the row 2 directions again. So now I'm going to skip a stitch and then half double crochet. We're working into both loops this time. Then I'm going to go back to the stitch that I skipped and create a puff stitch into that stitch. And this will be our repeat all the way across. So skip a stitch, half double crochet into the next, and then create a puff stitch. And we'll work this all the way across the front of this. So now that I'm back to the beginning, it's nice to have that stitch marker to know where we are placing our stitches as we come to the end here. And so I'm simply going to do my last puff stitch and then fasten off. Now to secure this last puff stitch, if you're beginning or ending with a puff stitch, it's nice to weave through it again, just to make that side a bit more straight. So I'm going to weave through all the loops on my puff stitch with my yarn needle, pulling it kind of tight, and then I can go ahead and weave in my ends and it looks more level there along the bottom. Next, we're going to talk about getting a bit more friendly with our yarn needle, and we're going to be doing some seaming. So I've already seamed along this one side. You'll take your garment, it'll be in quite a few different looking pieces. It'll look like a really odd shape, but you're simply going to fold down the front and then like folding in half like a sandwich, you'll match up the sides front and back, and then you'll notice it now is appearing to look like a cardigan where before it was just a weird piece of fabric. So I've already gone ahead and sewn one side. So you can see I started from the bottom here and I seamed up the side and underneath the arm, and that will help form those pieces. And then I'll do the same on this other side, and I'll simply seam these together starting from underneath here, over underneath the arms, and then all the way across the sleeves. Once you have that done, we are ready to go ahead and work on the end of the sleeves. Now I wanted to show you, I did go ahead and make another cardigan that is longer. I wanted one that was cropped and one that was long. I just couldn't help myself. I love this stitch. It's really simple and fun and cute. This is with the Color Mist yarn, but it's the same yarn line, just a bit different of coloring, but the weight's the same, the feel is the same. So on the sleeves, I did what I did along the front of this cardigan, but I did it around the sleeve. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that. So this is going to be worked similar to how we did on the front, but we'll be working in the round where we join and turn. So stitch markers, once again, are an excellent idea. I'm going to simply join my yarn, and then I'm going to slip stitch for the same way we did on the front, where I'm going to do one stitch per single crochet row and 2 slip stitches per double crochet row. I'm going to do that all the way around, and then I am going to show you what to do next. Now for the sleeves, I have slip stitch to join, and then I'm going to turn my work. And it's not a bad idea, once again, to use a stitch marker for this. I'm going to chain one, skip the first slip stitch, and in the front loop only of the second slip stitch, half double crochet. Then go back and work a puff stitch into that skipped stitch in the front loop only of that slip stitch. So the exact same thing we did on the front, we're going to work that repeat all the way around. The only difference is we're going to join and turn at the beginning of next round. So now after working those puff stitches around, I'm going to go ahead and join to the first stitch in the round, which, remember, that's your half double crochet stitch, not a puff stitch. And then I'm going to turn again. And now with the right side facing me, I'm going to go ahead and repeat that again. So I'll chain one, does not count as a stitch. And then I'm going to half double crochet into the second stitch. So I'm skipping the first, half double crocheting in the second, and then doing a puff stitch. Now, if you want your puff stitches to line up a little bit different, because these ones stagger, and I think I lined them up directly across from each other when I did my other version, you can simply start with a half double crochet stitch in the first stitch and then move on to the repeat just to shift it by one. But we'll work this all the way around and then we'll be able to fasten off. Now at the end of the round, you can fasten off. I don't like to do a slip stitch to join. I like to do the invisible join, which you can find on my blog. I just like the clean look of it. And then the next steps will just be to complete that other sleeve. Once you do that other sleeve, it is done. You will have a gorgeous cardigan. So let's take a look at that. Once you're done with this sleeve, it's time to finish the other sleeve, like I said, and then weave in your ends. And blocking is also always a great idea. It's like ironing your clothes. It makes all these stitches kind of open up and look really, really nice, and it helps it lay nice when you wear it. I love these wide sleeves. They're really in and fun right now, and it's fun to have that little bit of a detail that matches around the neck and the front of the cardigan. Now, I love having options. The most amazing thing about making your own garments is you get to decide how you like it. So never be afraid to go a different direction if you think you would like a certain style more. Now for this cropped cardigan, instead of doing the wide sleeves like I did on the longer cardigan, I really like the look of a poof sleeve. So we haven't decreased our sleeve, but we're going to bring it in by doing a cuff that tightens that down. So I've already done one. I'm going to kind of show you where we're headed. There's a huge difference between doing a wide sleeve and then like a poof sleeve. And this is what I want to show you as an option. So you can pick, you can do the wide sleeve with the puff stitches, or we can do a gathered sleeve, which adds a puff sleeve with these rib stitches. Now to get started on doing a ribbed sleeve, I'm going to go down 2 hook sizes. I'm going to go down to the size G 4mm. This will help our ribbing stitches be much tighter, and that will create the puff sleeve. I'm going to go ahead and attach my yarn and chain 12. Now in the second chain from the hook, I'm going to single crochet, and then I'm going to single crochet into the remaining 10 stitches. So that will be a total of 11 single crochet stitches down this chain. Next, we are going to slip stitch from the edge of the sleeve. Now, in order to have this scrunch in, we need to have a ratio for how many we're slip stitching. The best combination I found was to have 3 slip stitches per 4 rows. So basically every single one of your repeats, you only want to have 3 slip stitches along there. And that's what will cause it to gather and join in. So now I'm going to turn and skip those 2 slip stitches, and working in the back loop only, I'm going to single crochet 10. Then I will have 1 left over. So now I have 1 left over, and I'm going to single crochet through both loops of that last one. So that's a total of 11 stitches across our ribbing. And now I will turn, and we're going to repeat those 2 rows. So I'm going to single crochet through both loops of the first stitch. Notice I don't chain 1. I don't find it necessary. You can omit it, or you can if it makes you more comfortable. And then in the back loop only, I'm going to single crochet 10. And then I'm going to slip stitch 2 from the edge, being sure to keep track of where you slip stitched before and where you're headed with that. So in this next section here, I only want to do 3 slip stitches for that 4 row repeat there. So we'll simply slip stitch 2, and the next time I come back, I'll slip stitch 1 on that double crochet row. So if you kind of aren't sure where you are, you can keep checking the ribbing to see like, okay, is this what I think it's going to fit my wrist? It doesn't have to be perfect. You might get to the end and need a few more rows, and that's okay. You can test it out, kind of hold it up to your wrist and see if it's a good fit for you. Like I said, it doesn't need to be perfect. Just try to keep it in your head that you're going to slip stitch 2 stitches along the edge here per every, or 3 stitches along the edge here per every 4 rows. So 3 stitches per every 4 rows. And then you're going to turn and skip those slip stitches and work right back down that ribbing, single crocheting 10 into the back loop only, and then going through both loops of the very last stitch, turning and doing that again. You can already tell we've got a little bit of scrunching going on here, which is what we want. We want this to pull in. just like it does on this side. It really gathers and pulls, and it's a really nice poof sleeve. So work this all the way around and then come on back and I'll show you how to join your starting row with your end row so that they're joined together. Now, once you have worked this all the way around, it's time for us to go ahead and join our starting edge and our current edge together. And to do this, we will go through the first stitch through both loops and then grab the loop from the first edge, yarn over and slip stitch those together. And now in this next one, we're going to work in the back loop only. Then we're going to grab the loop from the first edge, yarn over, and slip stitch that together. So we will work all the way down these stitches working through the back loop and then the loop from the first edge, yarning over and slip stitching. Now once we've slip stitched all those together, we can go ahead and fasten off and weave in our end, and then we have a nice flexible cuff here. I like this look as well. It really brings in the sleeve, so it creates that poof sleeve. And this is also an option you can choose. Now for my cropped cardigan, because I'm doing my sleeves with ribbing, I thought it would be really nice to add some ribbing on the bottoms. This is a really cropped cardigan. This is another reason why it's nice to do custom garments, because if you don't like it so cropped or you want the ribbing on the bottom, this is an option as well. So I'm going to keep with an eye hook for the bottom of this, simply because I don't want it to pull in. I really don't want to change the fabric in terms of going down a hook size and having the ribbing really stretchy and pull in. I want it to lay a bit flatter. So I'm staying with the same crochet hook, and I'm simply going to grab the edge of my cardigan where I have the right side facing me and I've got this really nice front trim, and I'm going to join to the corner of this edge along the bottom, and then I'm going to join my yarn with a slip stitch and chain 12. Now after chaining 12, I'm going to do the exact same thing that we did on the sleeve, only I'm going to be slip stitching 1 stitch per stitch along the body here. I don't want it to pull or pucker or anything like that. So in the second chain from the hook, I'm going to go ahead and single crochet and then single crochet in the remaining stitches, which gives us 11 stitches across for this. And now when you're working across this poof, simply slip stitch where it makes sense, that it's not going to pull that fabric tight, that it's still going to lay nicely. And you don't need to pull your slip stitches tight at all. Then I'm going to turn and skip those 2 slip stitches, and in the back loop only, single crochet until the last stitch of the row, and we'll work through both the loops for the last stitch. And that is your 2-row repeat. So it's the same thing as the arms, only we don't need to join. So we're simply going to be working this ribbing, this 2-row repeat all the way across the bottom of this cardigan, and then we'll have a nice ribbed bottom edge just as an option. I like to give options in patterns so that you can customize the garment to your taste, your style, your look, and how you like to wear it, because you made it. It should be the way that you want. So I'm going to work this and come on back and show you what that looks like. Thank you so much for joining me today for this really fun cardigan. My favorite part about this pattern, and this is what tends to happen whenever I make something, is I like having options, and I hope you enjoyed that too. You can either do the ribbing sleeve with the ribbing bottom, you can leave your sleeves the wide sleeve with the puff stitches, and you can make it longer, like a longer cardigan, or shorter, like a cropped cardigan. Having options is the best part about crocheting, because we can customize it to our likes or our wardrobe, especially even in color. Using the Comfy Worsted is a great yarn to go for this. They have so many solid colors of this. And then of course, the Comfy Color Mist is really unique. It's the same yarn, but done in a different colorway, and it comes in a hank. And that's really amazing too. So we've got lots of yarn options for this one as well. And it's perfect for either spring, summer, fall. As a layering piece, it's just really comfortable to wear. This is a really soft cotton. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and come on back for really fun projects soon.